speaker and author, Shri Inderjit Khanna, and his life experience and CV is so long that I'm going to do extreme injustice. So he joined the Indian Administrative Services in 1966. Speaker and author. Sorry. Okay. And he served as a collector, various districts in Rajasthan, then also the director of primary and secondary education, commissioner tribal area development, secretary of planning, energy, and also in the finance department. And interestingly, also spent 2 years here as at IIMA as visiting professor from 1981 to 83. So we were sharing these interesting stories just before coming here. And towards the end of his distinguished career in the services, he also served as Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Rural Development, as Additional Secretary and Special Secretary in the Department of Economic Affairs, and as the Enforcement Director. And then he went on to serve as the Chief Secretary of the state of Rajasthan. And post his retirement, he was actually appointed as the State Election Commissioner. So, like I said, I think I'm doing extreme injustice by trying to summarize his, such distinguished career. And he's here to talk to us about his book, Flashes Before My Eyes. And all of us are looking forward to hearing from him. And the way we will do this is we will let him tell us a little bit about the book very briefly, just so that I can initiate the conversation. The book Flashes Before My Eyes, The Civil Services and More is an autobiography about the personal and professional life of a civil servant. And the book seeks to cover the sacrifices made by Mr. Khanna's parents in bringing up him and his two siblings. And he writes a lot about his family and their experiences as they moved around in the country. And it emphasizes the importance that family laid on education and the upbringing of him and his siblings, sometimes even at the cost of basic amenities in their life. And then he goes on to talk about a lot of interesting experiences as, during his schooling at Sherwood, his college years at St. Stephen's, and then, of course, his distinguished career in the services. But what I found very interesting, and I'll come to that when we do the Q&A, is how fondly he talks about his wife. I wish she were here today, because I think that's what really caught my attention.
She's not in the world now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My apologies. Yeah, my apologies. And he talks so fondly about her. Every few pages, he talks about how she would just silently, accommodate all the challenges that they were facing. So it would have been, lovely to see the entire family, but as Mr. Khanna just shared. And then, he talks also a little bit about what kind of expectations he has from the various policy departments that he worked in. And I would also like later to ask him a question about that. So over to you, Mr. Khanna, without any further ado.
Okay. I prefer to speak from here, though I find now that standing for an hour and talking is a little tiring for me, but still. Professor Chindarkar, my old friend and colleague and long while professor at the IIM Ahmedabad, Professor T.V. Rao, well known in HR and OB area. I'm sure some of you have come across the books by him and Professor Uday Parikh. I'm grateful to the institution for giving me this opportunity to talk about this book. And of course, when I'm going to talk about this book, I'll keep track of the time. I will give you a little bit of a preface into why I thought of writing an autobiography. I was not inclined to do so. Some suggestions were there earlier, but I said it's all nonsense. Normally, the person who writes an autobiography ends up blowing his own or her own trumpet. On 3rd December 2020, I'm very precise on this. In the morning, I was seeing a WhatsApp, and there was this short clip by Mr. Amitabh Bachchan, in which he was talking during a particular speech that he made at some institution in Mumbai. three things that came out to me, which hit me hard. Number one, sacrifices made by his parents in the context of the two boys, their two brothers, Amitabh and Ajita. Two, the importance that they gave to good education to the two boys. And third, what he imbibed from his school, which is Sherwood College, Nainital, in terms of the education that they gave him. Now, it so happens that I thought to myself that I have most of these three things in common with him. Number one, I do feel and felt strongly that my parents had probably sacrificed more than what his parents had in terms of what facts he shared with us. Two, the extreme importance that my parents gave to educating three of us, because they had three children, my two elder brother and sister and myself. Sacrifice and education. And thirdly, the type of education that we received in our school, which was common because I was also at Sherwood and Amitabh was also at Sherwood. We happened to share the same class, and therefore we lived together for the better part of 3 years as co-students. Amitabh spent only 3 years. I spent 6 years. And obviously these 3 years impacted him, which he doesn't forget even till today. So that very day I said I must sit down and start writing to acknowledge many things and to share many things. I also want to refer to two other important books which some of you may like to pick up. Obviously, they would be in your library. One is a book by Mr. Montek Ahluwalia. You must have heard of him. I'm sure you could not have missed a name like that. It is called Backstage. He doesn't call it an autobiography. He says memoirs. And it traces, apart from his younger life, 40 years in the government in India when he returned from first England and then the US. The element of sacrifice by his father. Because it hit me also when I was reading it more recently. I had started my book already, but and Montek and I worked together in the Ministry of Finance for better part of 3 years. In college, he was just a year junior, but in the ministry, he was my senior. He was the finance secretary. I was the assistant secretary. But in his case, the sacrifice that he has related in the book of his father, who was in the subordinate account service and chose to forego his promotion to the All India Defense Account Service to enable Montek to continue to study in Delhi. Now, that's a big sacrifice, I know, because subordinate service is one thing in government, and the All India service or the central service is quite another thing. And it obviously was a tremendous sacrifice the father made to enable Montek to continue to study in Delhi Public School, later St. Stephen's College, and then, of course, Rhodes Scholars, Oxford, America, and so on. The second book that I would like to bring to your notice, and these are very interesting books. It's a person I don't know, the author. He is Mani Bhaumik from the state of West Bengal, born into penury, very, very poor family. This is the time of the Bengal famine, late 1930s, World War, early 1940s. He was a very small baby child, and he refers to his grandmother. Probably he was closer to his grandmother than he was to his mother. Maybe sometimes children is like that. Grandmothers are more indulgent sometimes. So he has admitted and acknowledged in his book, it's called Code Name God. He has acknowledged that his grandmother, because they had no money, his father had become Gandhiji's follower, so was running away from the police, hardly ever came home. And the grandmother, he keeps on emphasizing, whatever little food came to the house would give him and starve herself. And he admits that she virtually starved to death. Now, these are the type of sacrifices that I have noticed. And I'm sure if some of you really start reflecting, you will find similar cases within your families too. Very, very important for anybody who works. I just learned from professor here about the difficulties she faced, the little baby that she has. These are struggles. And ultimately, a lot depends on you as an individual, on the support that your family gives you. In the case of men, it is obviously the wife. It could be vice versa also, as in the case of Professor here. With my wife, I had told her when we decided to get married that she had done her B.Ed and obviously was intending to teach, that look, you will get married, but you can't teach because I am in a government job and I am transferable. And I am not going to do this and say, okay, please stop my posting. I'll go wherever government sends me. So if you wish to continue to work, there will be hardly any family life. She very sweetly agreed not to work, occupied herself with 101 other things throughout her life. But perceptions change. When our daughter Sonali was born, and we both were discussing as she is growing up, we were convinced, I had changed my mind by then, that the child must work. Girl or boy must be well educated and must work. And she is working, though happens to have changed her profession once from the corporate world into just teaching in a school and enjoys it, whatever that may be. But the support that one gets, and particularly for a civil servant who is, 25 days posting, 6 months posting, every time you're packing your bags, going off here, going off there, is difficult. And if I can give you an example, when I was given the offer by Professor Vyas, TV had initiated me into it to come to Ahmedabad, and I was associated with him and Professor Ravi Mathai and Professor Uday Parikh in the project they were doing in Rajasthan. It was an opportunity out of the blue. TV was the first one who mentioned, why don't you take some time off? He mentioned, come on, what is called that? Some sort of leave and come. I said, well, leave, why should I take? But let me see. And then Professor Vyas, who was the director, came to Jaipur and sort of interviewed me, so to say, to probably ascertain. I naturally had to ask my wife. Our daughter was just about 2.5 years old, not of much consequence at that point of time in terms of education. So my wife willingly said, okay. Now for her, and that's the type of sacrifice that I say, you may or may not appreciate while you are young, but later, in fact, many of these thoughts came to my mind as and when I was writing. I was not able to acknowledge, probably did not even say anything. I told her, I said, I have this offer. Would you agree to come to Ahmedabad? Ahmedabad was totally new. She was an Ajmer girl, married in, I was in Jaipur and Rajasthan, here and there, fairly big bungalows. In fact, the bungalow that we were in, when I moved from there to here, and I took my daughter and grandchildren just now to Vidyanagar, showed them the little flat, to surprise them. Probably 20 to 30 flats would fit into that bungalow of mine. No telephone, no garage, no servant quarter, etc., etc. Just 3 small rooms. And my parents and my wife's parents used to come and stay with us. So there's a tremendous amount of sacrifice from your spouse to enable you to be able to give your full and everything to whatever little work that you are trying to do. Not the breadwinner, but certainly one who is the backbone. In this case, is the spouse, the lady, to enable you to work. No grudges. Two keywords from my service and from the autobiography I want to start with. Civil and service. Simple words. Service. What it is. In very simple Hindi, it is seva. And no civil servant should consider himself other than doing seva. Very difficult, I know, but that is what it really should be. The other is civil, which is the opposite, and I'll give it by a negative example. I shared it yesterday also, so to Sonali and others it may be a repetition, but I can't help sharing it. And what is not civil will obviously make you understand what therefore is or should be civil. And I'm taking this from the level of a chief secretary. a director of a department in the state was coming to the chief secretary for a discussion. Chief secretary wanted a discussion. So he took along with him the deputy director, who was dealing with that file. In government, you see, very important thing is the file. We used to carry files all over. So he took her. So when they entered the chief secretary's room, the director naturally moved and the chief secretary pointed to a chair and he was going to sit down, and it happened to be a lady. The deputy director moved towards the other chair. Chief secretary did this. So she was taken aback a little bit. In other words, he was restraining her from sitting down. So the director then intervened and said, "Sir, I have brought her because she is dealing with the matter." So then, according to the lady herself, he condescended. She could tell by the reaction and the, facial expressions, all these things, so many things you don't have to say. The other person experiences by your behavior. Very reluctantly, he ushered her into the chair. Was that civil? And if this officer was behaving like this, and I'm sad to say, God help us when he's dealing with people. That is not civil. So as a civil servant, I think for anybody, these two things are of extreme importance. That's why I don't like the use of the word bureaucrat. It is very negative. I always like to be seen or perceived, if at all, as a civil servant. I'm not saying that I was civil at all times. I did get angry, can't deny it. I keep telling my grandchildren that I'm impatient by nature. Can't help it. I know my fault, but it happens. And impatience sometimes makes you angry. Again, I can only say, but I don't hold it for too long, but I am that. It's a weakness. I can't help it. Values. With TV, we have discussed many times. Values. No matter what work you are doing, not only civil service, your values, your actions are extremely important to all who are around you. Now, where do these values begin? They begin from your childhood. They begin from your parents. They begin from your family, extended family, friends, your peers in school. All these are places where you are learning things. I'll give another example. These are very simple, everyday examples, but to me, they are very important. I'm driving my car in Jaipur at a very important crossing. I stop at a red light. Behind me, whizzes past me a two-wheeler. Young man must be that little fraction of a second, probably 30 years old. A young boy standing in front. Red light, no problem. Means of no consequence. He just crosses. Now, what is that little boy learning? Law has no place in what I do. All this is irrelevant to me. It's not being said. It is being observed. Values are like that. I'll give another example. Same with traffic. But these are, you see, common points which will have a lot and indicate your character as you go along in life. Another colleague of mine, retired, he was driving his car, stopped at a traffic light. Out of the Rajasthan University gate came two boys, young boys, like many of you here, driving a two-wheeler. They had a red light. He had a green signal. He took off. The crossing was a little broad. Went and hit his car. So he got out to see what damage could have been done. So he sort of, being elderly, he reprimanded them and said, "Bhai, ye kya karte ho? Aap log dekhte nahi, red light hai." So you know what those two boys replied to him? They said, "Aapki hari light hai, to kya aap humko maar doge?" Shows lack of upbringing. Ultimately, these are not going to be good citizens of the country. Not good specimens. It's all part of the upbringing. And this is where your value system starts. Then the second other aspect, I said family, friends, your teachers, very important. Whether be it in school, right from your primary school upwards. College. I'll give another example. When I was in St. Stephen's, I had a young teacher who joined teaching me mathematics. I'm only talking of one. But more or less all were the same. He was a Rhodes Scholar, very bright. In addition, he represented India at the Rome Olympics and the 800 meters race. Obviously, apart from his whatever he had upstairs, he was obviously physically very good. Somewhere down in my BSc final year, I must have asked him a question. He did not have that solution to that. Mathematics requires lots of, equations and such type of things. I had forgotten. You all must be asking a lot of questions in class, sometimes to tease the teacher, sometimes to evaluate the teacher, whatever it be. Chapter closed as far as I am concerned. Now, here Ranjit, on 11th of February 1962, sitting in Jabalpur, not in New Delhi, not in Delhi, not in St. Stephen's. So obviously 2 or 3 months later, and I was in my final year, but he must have realized that ये Inderjit को अगर मैंने solution नहीं दिया, so maybe it may not be good for him. Final exam was 2 months down. From Jabalpur, he writes a postcard, which is in my book, the copy, to another colleague, Professor Satish Mathur. Dear Satish, Inderjit asked a question in class. I didn't have a solution. Here it is. Give it to him. Postcard is with me. Why did it mean so much to me? It obviously must have hit me somewhere. That I have forgotten about an issue, but this man still remembers. It has not left his head. These are the type of teachers that we had. So they play an extremely important role in formulating your character, your personality. Peers and friends, obviously, and of course the overall environment that you live in. Chaotic sometimes, overpopulated certainly. I'm coming to Ahmedabad after 13, 15 years and lived here 2 years, and I know how open our flat is now, like a virtually like a what could I call it? Jhuggi Jhoppi. Today it was so open. Sonali says it was open. But that is it. That's overpopulation, one of India's biggest problems. But be that as it may. But over time, I want to divide this period that we have lived in into 4 periods very quickly. Number 1, from 47 to 75, 1947 to 75. And there is a deterioration. I'm trying to use these arguments to say that there is a fall in the standards of national character. The younger generation will always say that these old fogies, they are cynical, they don't realize, but I'll try to explain that little point to you. Now, that was a period where there was a fervor because of the independence of the country. There was an aura. And then in that time, there were also 3 wars. I'm not arguing that we should have another war now to improve the standards of the national character to which it has fallen. No, but there were 3 wars, 62, 65, 71. And I know we were young, school, college, the type of atmosphere that prevailed at that time. Today, God forbid there was a war, I don't know how many of us would keep the blackouts, how many of us would observe the curfews, how many of us would, do many things that are required. So that was one very solid period, as the result of which that national character, which was the freedom struggle and such things, came and was to some extent imbibed by people who lived in those times. And then came the emergency. The second period is 75, 79. Not a very nice period. And deterioration, according to my assessment and some of the people that I talked to, started. Then third is the period of coalitions, which came from about 89 till 2014. Even Dr. Manmohan Singh's government over 10 years was a coalition government. The Congress party never had a full majority. A long period of coalitions, and sometimes we used to feel that a coalition government is going to be a weak government. And now, from 14 till today, 7 years, it's a government which has I can't say thumping majority, but a certain majority. And still people are unhappy, and to an extent, sometimes rightly so. The farmers' agitation and the demonetization. I don't know how many of you used to use a bank. At that point of time, you may have been too small. It was terrible. You couldn't get your own money out of the bank. So I have felt that there has been a deterioration in the standards of things that were done over a period of time. important, sometimes you may say jargon, less of government and more of governance. What is government and what is governance? Government, according to me, I am not a theorist. Government is the machinery to govern. But lay back after you have done spinning the wheels. Don't keep on interfering. Governance is that part of the government which deals with making the wheels turn, the doing work. Now, it's, as I said, something above and beyond government. We are all part of doing the governance. To an extent, at some point of time, also in the government, we can't deny that. But basically delivering. Some of you must have heard, there is a patwari in the revenue sector, much maligned. There is a bus conductor. He is also part of the government. In my book, I have given stories of how a good bus conductor and a not so good bus conductor. The Haryana Roadways bus conductor was very kind to me in a difficult situation. And my own Rajasthan Roadways bus conductor said, sorry, nothing doing, I can't help. It's the individual who makes the difference. And the individual is about his upbringing. It makes a lot of difference. Even if you are in the corporate world, it will reflect in how you handle situations. So what should government be like and what should governance be like? It has to be participatory, and that is why democratic decentralization, handing over power to the elected bodies at the grassroots level, which we call Panchayati Raj institutions or municipal bodies, is at the crux of this whole system of governance. It has not taken place, but statutorily through the amendments to the Constitution in 1993 and 1994, which are called the 73rd and 74th amendments to the Constitution, there has been a tremendous strengthening structurally of the Panchayati Raj and the urban local bodies. There are many things still wanting. Ours is such a massive country with 28 states. One state may be doing much, much better in this than others. But that is where you are transferring power to the people, and that is where it should be. And why does it not go to the full extent? It doesn't go to the full extent because the politician who is at the state level, the MLA, doesn't want to see a challenger to him or the member of parliament, because sometimes the chairman of the Zilla Parishad may have more money. Money means that's flowing from government programs than he has. Therefore, he may be wielding more power. He may be more popular. The MP may not. Similarly with the MLA. And they are the ones who normally try to see that funds and powers do not go to the local people. They will make mistakes to say that a sarpanch, an uneducated lady, but not that the current Prime Minister I am referring to, but the point is any member of parliament, if he need not be educated, why or not should a member who is to come into panchayat be educated or a sarpanch be educated? Some states have passed legislation. They don't want parallel sources of power. But this is where the direction should be going and has gone to an extent. Coming to the civil service, recruitment is extremely important. The UPSC, which brings us into the civil service, still, I would say, is by and large without blemish. I think we go through, we do not question the judgment by and large of the UPC, but the competition is so strong that 1 mark means you are 20 places down or 30 places up. That's the type of competition there is. But state public service commissions, and what I hear about them, and they are in each state and they are responsible for all the recruitment that takes place other than at the central level. There's a lot to be said about them, unfortunately so. And I think they have to be made the finest instrument, because the problem will start there. If you recruit bad people, then you will get bad officials. So the best people should be put in these type of recruiting institutions. There's a staff selection commission and so on. The second stage at which we have to take care is the training institution. You give them bad training, that's it. The rest of the 35 years of their working life, they will be bad human beings, they will be bad officials or workers. Those 2 years of training are critical. Therefore, the trainers must be the best that the country has. And why not? But no, right from our academy at Mussoorie down to whatever state public administration, you will have people who feel that they have been put on the shelf when they go to these institutions to work as director or on the faculty or other. They don't take interest. As an argument, I really would like, for whatever is worth, to ask the central government, name me a single director who was appointed at the Mussoorie Academy who has become in 75 years the cabinet secretary, which is the highest post in the country, one in the country, not even one. That means you are putting officers who may be good, but they are not the topmost. Even one you could not find who would be a cabinet secretary in this country in 75 years. I wonder. So the best trainers of all types, I mean, they are academic, they are from the civil service, wherever. The trainers have to be best. Then only the training will be the best. And government, I can tell you, spends a lot of time and money. 2 years in our case. Lakhs of rupees are spent on us, even our salaries when we are on probation. Extremely important. Because unless you start on the right foot, you will never get ahead. My director in the academy, I must give you his example. He was from the Indian Civil Service and from Maharashtra cadre. My name, Pimpotkar. A great stickler. Sometimes it used to irritate us. The door is closed at 9 o'clock. There's a clock outside. You're not here. I'm not interested in what your clock says. Door is closed. Out, you get your half day's leave to start with. Otherwise, full day's leave. If you repeat, and so on. Maybe leave without payouts. This brings in discipline. We don't forget. He was always on the riding field with us. He was doing the PT with us. He used to come and take classes. So everything, he was totally involved in our training process. That is what a leader is all about. If he happens to be as a leader in the training institution. When I left my training of 2 years and was going for my first posting as what we call a sub-divisional officer, to a subdivision on the border with Pakistan, Rai Singh Nagar in Ganganagar district, my collector, very, very good man, told me, remember 2 things. And I remember them till today, which is 50, 60 years ago. Obviously, it must have gone in somewhere. So I'm not forgotten. Number 1, simple advice. Never criticize your predecessors. There's a weakness. We think we are always better than the person who was there before. Number 1. Number 2, don't make changes immediately. There's a desire. You want to do something quickly. ये ठीक नहीं है, टेबल वो बदल लो, ये फाइल सिस्टम ठीक नहीं है. He said, don't do anything. Just observe and do your work on a daily basis. After time, when you have settled down, then think of changes. Now, this is a very simple advice, but it has stuck. And I think it's good. How much I practiced it is a different matter, but it has stuck. There is this constant controversy of a generalist versus a specialist. Criticism. What are these IAS officers? They are generalists. They don't understand. Today, I am collector of a district, handling everything from a fire to a famine to election to census, God knows what. And suddenly I become director of education. Not the slightest idea of what, well, I've been through 11, 12, 15 years of school and college, but that apart. So there is a criticism in public. Sometimes politicians also criticize us. And the specialists, I don't know who's better. But my thinking, and if I can say the tuppence that it may be worth, advice in the matter is, if our 35 years of service in service is divided into 3 compartments. 1, the first 10 years, which includes 2 years as training academy and the district. and the next 8 years, where we are subdivisional officers, collectors, heads of departments. That is the stage where we are continuing to work and learn. So things are new. I was a Delhi-born person. I had not the foggiest idea of what revenue administration was about. Had hardly been to a village, Patwari, unheard of. So we are learning. I don't know how many of you have heard of the phrase Girdavri. You have. You probably lived in a little bit of a rural area. So you have heard. Okay. But those like me who lived in Delhi or Mumbai or Kolkata, even Ahmedabad, would not have heard it. Jama Bandi. So you are learning. Okay. 10 years. Working, but learning. I'm talking from the perspective of the government, how they should proceed. The next 10 years is where government should ensure that every civil servant specializes. Whether it is some semblance of training abroad, whether it is the work that you are doing. In the first 10 years, they should have identified what you are capable of. Your academic background counts. Your work experience in those 10 years counts. And then your own desires, you want to be in a particular field, should reflect 2 or 3 areas where you should specialize. In the third period, which is the last 15 years, where you are giving back to the system, to the government, and through the government to the people, whatever may be in terms of policy making. You may not be the policy maker per se, but you have a fairly important or large role to play in policy making. The last 15, it's the biggest of the 3 periods. That's my perception of how it should be. And if I look at myself, I would say that, well, the second period of 10 years, I specialized in what I thought and what I enjoyed doing: rural development, education, and finance. Or you may say these are disparate areas, but they gave me joy in working. I enjoyed working, and as it so happens, in the later 15 years, I didn't manage, I mean, whatever they say, the postings, but I did remain in those areas by and large. There is an important issue, and it can be in the corporate world, it can be in the government, is performance appraisal. Sometimes causes a lot of heartburning, because performance appraisal enables your movement up the ladder. Is it fair? Is it just? You can have bad superiors who you may be working very hard and they don't appreciate. Sometimes they may ask you to do something which is not correct. You don't do, and they get against you. So you have to face all these challenges. But performance appraisal is very important. It's not always done well. I know of umpteen cases where people have unjustifiably graded people wrongly, withheld gradation. 5 years I'm supervising a person, I don't write his CR, only to keep him under my thumb. And when his 5-year period or my 5-year period is finishing, I'll write all the CRs. In that 5-year period, he's under my thumb. And he knows it because his ACR is not gone. There are unfortunate cases. The monitoring system is not there. On paper it exists, I know, but it doesn't operate. I'll share an example in which the institute is involved when I am involved. TV was also there. From here, 6 of us used to go out in what we called a rural development project. 81, 82, 83. Professor Ravi Mathai, Professor T.V. Rao, Professor Uday Parikh, Anil Gupta, Ranjit Gupta, Kirja Sharan, Manu Shroff. And we had chosen 3 districts: Banswara in Rajasthan, Panchmahals in Gujarat, and Jhabua in Madhya Pradesh. All were adjacent districts, tribal districts. And we said we are studying the tribal administration in those states. So one of our visits, and we used to go in Ravi's Matador, and we all huddled together. So we had to talk about things. So on that visit back from Jhabua, we said, let us evaluate the performance of the collector. Collector is the kingpin in the district. Young man, I suppose 8-10 years. So we had asked him for time, as when we are winding up our 3-day visit, we always go to his office. He said, please come to my house at 6 o'clock. I'll have more time for you. We did. We sat with him for 1 hour and we left. We told him what we had done, shared some things, got his views, and we were driving back from Jabua to Ahmedabad, 6-7 hours. Somehow the issue of performance appraisal came up, and we said, let us evaluate the collectors and his performance. Okay, we all did. So Ravi asked me, he said, you please tell me, you are part of the civil service, how did you evaluate this gentleman? So in one word, I said, very good. So he says, you have not evaluated him, because higher than very good is outstanding. You have not evaluated him as outstanding. Now see the perception of that man, Ravi, Professor Ravi Mittal, your first director incidentally here. And you step down after 5 years saying that I do not want to continue. If the institution wants to keep me as a professor, I would be only too happy to serve. But 5 years is enough for me. I'm not going to stay more than that. In any case, that apart. So Ravi tells me, he says, you downgraded him because you saw that government vehicle come. The lady, we were sitting in the lawn, so obviously vehicle which came into, lady got down, 3 children got down. Obviously they had been somewhere, it was evening time, 6 and 7 p.m. Must have gone either to the market or to meet friends, and that was a government vehicle. Should she have been using the government vehicle with the family? But you have been unfair in your judgment. I said, how? He said, look here, this official who is meeting you after office hours, he could very well have asked you to come tomorrow morning. If you want to meet him, stay back. If you don't, then go. In any case, he's 24 hours on the job, because there's a fire, whatever there is. He's the first person who is told from the headquarters, go there, have a look at what's going wrong. Then why grudge him the use of this government vehicle? On payment if necessary, though he said, I don't agree with it. It is the government's fault, which is creating, and unfortunately, sometimes even there is public criticism of the misuse of a government vehicle. It's become minor now because it is so much misused, I suppose, but that apart. But the perception in the performance appraisal which Ravi had was far superior to what I was doing, which was narrow-minded, because I had been taught in the academy that you not only have to be honest, you have to be seen to be honest. And I said that was not being seen to be honest. I was wrong, probably, doesn't matter. But there are things of perception. And that is where performance appraisal, according to me, because that affects the life of the individual who's working. Anyway, reward systems. Again, corporate world, I know my son-in-law works 20 years now. He has been in the corporate world. It all goes with your PLI, performance linked incentive. Lots of money comes your way depending on how you are graded. And it's well accepted in the corporate world. It can't happen in the government. Government is too huge a system. Too much of, let us say, bending over backwards to please your boss would come about. Monetary incentives, I'm talking of. But there are umpteen other ways to indicate the annual performance of appraisal report is always there. But there are umpteen other ways to evaluate the performance of an employee, which will indicate to you that he is doing extremely, extremely well. My former chief minister used to very often tell me, Bhairu Singh Ji Shekhawat, आपकी सरकार में तो ये गधे और घोड़े सब एक तरीके से चलते हैं. I hope you understand that much of Hindi. A donkey and a horse, stallion, they work in the same speed, but they are all rewarded equally. In a lighter vein, he used to say. Postings and tenures in government don't take place properly, are haphazard. Unfortunately, they should not be. That is why the Supreme Court at times intervenes and says, in posts like now the Cabinet Secretary, the Enforcement Director, the Director CBI, some of the secretaries to Government of India, should be at least 2 years, irrespective of the fact that their retirement age may come in between. But why does the Supreme Court be required to pass an order? It is automatic, it should be, but it doesn't happen. Politically, those transfers and postings take place. The longer the posting, the more stability there is. Mind you, there are also people in government. Sometimes we talk only of the civil service, IAS and such like, who do extremely outstanding work. Clerks, bus conductors. I'll share some examples. Go unrecognized. So don't only think that it is that collector you are meeting or the secretary you are meeting or the director you are meeting. It's the small people who make the government work, and some of them are also in their own way outstanding. We ourselves as the senior civil servants sometimes criticize the lower levels in the bureaucracy, and I've said that if I could remember lower division clerks and assistants and section officers 50 years afterwards, obviously they must have done outstanding work. So recognize those who are doing it. I know for teachers, for example, you have state awards and national awards and such like. Sometimes my wife used to tell me, you seem to be working hard, but where is your award? It didn't come my way. Doesn't matter. But maybe she felt a little bit that I should have got something, but I didn't. Doesn't matter. But there are, but it doesn't matter really. I think three others, I won't mention this constitutional amendment, I've said it. Corruption, when we talk of government and civil service, always the issue comes up, corruption to hai government. Corruption is in every country in this world. Levels may vary, extent of corruption may vary, but it's everywhere. Unfortunate, should not be there. That is why the more you streamline the system, there is talk of online activity, you don't meet the babu. If you don't meet the babu, then where is the question of him asking for money? Where is the question of the PN who allows you entry into the door of the officer's room, getting whatever, 50 rupees, 100 rupees or something. So irritating things like that. If you can do it from outside, from your home, whether it's any government office, or in bank, etc., these are steps in that direction. And those of you who file income tax returns will be happy that the online system is a great improvement on the past. It was very troublesome earlier. It's not that it's not troublesome today sometimes, but much more systematic and seamless than it was earlier. How do we try to overcome? You will say, sir, you have said corruption, but बताइए कुछ हो भी सकता है कि नहीं? Well, number one, we must get politicians who are better. That's where things start. A politician who sets the example is obviously going to get better people down the line. I'll share one case with you. We had a chief minister by name Barkatullah Khan way back in the 70s. He was a cabinet minister at that time in Rajasthan. And this is, of course, not mine, but related to me by one of my colleagues, who was an SDO at that time in Mount Abu, nearby. So the minister was having a conference with his officers of the local self-government department, and the SDO in routine had an invitation for dinner that evening. He did not go. He felt it is not necessary. The next morning, he went for his morning walk, the SDO, little realizing. When he came back, the PN at his house handed him a visiting card and said, "Sir, एक साहब आए थे, अपनी गाड़ी चला रहे थे, Fiat गाड़ी, वो आपको कार्ड देके गए, आपके लिए पूछ रहे थे, आप नहीं थे, वो कार्ड छोड़." So this friend of mine looked at the card, Barkatullah Khan, Minister for Local Self-Government, Government of Rajasthan. So he was taken aback. Why did he come? He said, "अपनी गाड़ी चला रहे थे." No minister today will have 4 cars following, 2 cars leading, and so on. He was driving his own Fiat car. So then, of course, he went to the circuit house, and the minister said, "I'm sorry, I came to apologize that my officers did not properly invite you to the fund." Now, look at the magnanimity of that minister. Look at the quality as compared to so many ministers today. When I said deterioration of standards, that's the type of situation that I'm referring to. And it's not a thing which happened to me. It's my friend who relates to me. Driving his own car. How many ministers today drive? Their sons will drive, I have seen, driving a car to Delhi with the red light going like this. And an official car says so and so. And when I found out whose car that was ex-minister's car, and it was the son who was taking the car to Delhi. Now, this is the deterioration. Unfortunate, we can improve on it, and it is the politician who must do it. The second that I can think of is harsh official action against the officials if they are corrupt, which means courts also. You can't linger with a case. I sometimes find in my, I'm now retired, but officers whom I know are not clean, suspended 4 or 5 times, gone to jail also, but they will keep moving up the ladder. Courts give them reprieve. So there has to be strict criminal action where it happens. And strict means with the politician also and with the civil servant also. Not lingering for 15 years, 1 appeal, 2 appeals, and so on. It has to be swift. And courts also must decide such cases, because they are very important cases. But if they can take up the case of Arnab Goswami within 24 hours and give him bail, then why can't corruption cases involving crores and crores of rupees be taken up? Political interference, again, you all will ask. Yes, simple answer. Yes, there is political interference. But that is, in fact, I won't look at it as interference. It's the job of a politician to bring problems to you. Even though he may not be a minister. If he's a minister, he still has his own constituency, his own party people. But it is for you to decide on them. And when it is not right, it has to be told. If it is brought in black and white, it has to be told in black and white. If it is brought by word of mouth, you will say then, how do you last out? Well, you may not. But what is the worst that will happen to you? And that does happen to some people. You are transferred. You are put awaiting orders. No job. Very rarely you will come across, I don't know, that you have been put out of job. Out of job means sacked, because that requires a due process by law. So why can't you take it that way? And let me tell you that politicians also know very well where you stand. So first of all, many such unfortunate requests may not come to you. And if they come and you hold your ground, you are not likely to suffer. That's my feeling. There are many examples. I will not go into them in detail. The last point I want to make about my state, Rajasthan. A wonderful state to work in. I always say it's amongst the best. We may not be delivering the best as Gujarat does. I worked here 2 years and I know the credit goes to the people of Gujarat, to the people working in Gujarat. I have experienced it because when I came here, as I said, there was no government system behind me. I was just an ordinary person working in the state of Gujarat. And but the systems were so good 40 years ago. But in terms of bonhomie, for a civil servant to be working in, when I compare notes with my colleagues across the country, it's probably one of the best states. I won't talk about other states. People may be offended, but it is one of the best states to have worked in. Even now, of course, we do feel sometimes things have deteriorated again there. But that apart, in our time, it was one of the best. And we have, mind you, worked in all types of governments. Coalition governments, BJP government, Janta government, Congress government. It's not that both in the state and in Delhi. So it's not that you can say we have not faced. Maybe the worst that we have seen in some other states, we were fortunate enough not to have in our state. But it has been a wonderful state to work in. The people there, the colleagues there, all very good. And I round it off, I must say that I did enjoy my work. And I always end whatever I say with how many of us in this room are, in terms of the blood group, there's a blood group called B positive. And any hands up? A fair number. I'm told by doctors that B positive is one of the most common blood groups. So my answer at the end is always be positive in what you are trying to do. Basically, that is your blood group. So why not be positive? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khanna, for that excellent overview of the book and of your experiences. So we already have a few questions coming in. This is a question that we have from Mr. Narendra Sisodia. This is because this event is also being live cast.
Narendra is my colleague from Jaipur.
Okay. So it's also to do with some of your own personal experiences working with politicians. So most civil servants have to deal with at least some difficult politicians in their careers. You seem to have escaped them. What explains this? Just good luck or some personality traits?
No. I have not escaped. It's not that I have faced difficult circumstances, but one thing I forgot to say. There's somebody above who is protecting you at all times. As I said, the first stage of protection, it might be your chief secretary. If you are a junior officer, he will protect. It will be your chief minister. I have seen Bharat Singh ji umpteen times protecting civil servants who are doing good work, who had done no wrong, were unjustly attacked by politicians. You have a layer which protects you. And if even that fails, it's the Lord above, according to me. That's why I mentioned that book to you when I started, Code Name God. These are the last 3 words of that book. It may be fortuitous. I've given examples of, I will not give that incident. All right, it's in the book. During president's rule, and I'm sure you know all about it, the governor is the government. Okay? Because there's no cabinet. He's not answerable to anybody. There's no legislative assembly. We had a governor. I've used a polite word, a hard taskmaster, a tough man. Okay? But he was a brusque man also. He didn't like you, head is chopped off. He told my friend, the one Barkatullah Khan, he was SDO, then he was, at that point of time, he was Home Secretary. He asked for some transfer. The Home Secretary told him, sir, these are the reasons I can't. He didn't want to take no for an answer. He told the Chief Secretary, tomorrow morning, the Home Secretary will not sit in the office. You know? Many people face that, the ire of the governor. Tough time. All governors work from Raj Bhavan. They don't come to the Chief Minister's office. He was one who wanted to show that he, from your home state, Chenna Reddy. Oh. So he used to come to the Chief Minister's office, danda in hand, sit down, and of course, do all his work there. I don't know. I was Finance Secretary, not a very unimportant post. Home Secretary and Finance Secretary are reasonably important posts. I was already Finance Secretary. Bharat Singh ji had made me Finance Secretary. I continued. But I was not kicked out in 6 months or even another 6 months thereafter when new governors came. And the personal physician to the governor used to tell me, well, friend, common, you're from the SMS Medical College. Ye Khanna sahab, aap kaise bach jate ho? So I said, I don't know. He said, aap unko file pe bhi unke decision ko kehte ho ye galat hai. There is, I have mentioned. There was a contractor who was L1 and we gave him the contract. And after some days, the governor said, cancel this contract and give it to L4. We said, how can we give it to L4? L1, L4 means the lowest and the fourth lowest and so on. In any case, it is mentioned here. But my neck was not chopped off. I don't know why. Somebody must be there who is protecting me because there was no chief minister at that time. Another was a foreign party who came, if Narendra is hearing, about it. Lignite thermal power plant, big investment. Recommended by Power Secretary in Government of India and Bharat Singh ji, and there was President's rule was not there. First agreed to meet them. Then when I went and explained with the Chief Secretary, I said, these are not desirable people. So he quietly walked into the assembly and told Chief Secretary and the chairman and myself, he said, you please handle him and send him away. So that was, but when the governor came in, again they approached. And I got a summons that governor wants to meet them in New Delhi tomorrow, and you are required to be present. So I knew that maybe heads may roll. So I got sound advice first, because I went to the advisor. You know, there's a layer, and that advisor is there. So my advisor was a very good officer. And I asked him, I said, sir, I'm asked to go. I will go. What do I do? This is the matter. So he said, meet him beforehand. Explain everything to him, why you have your views. Go to the meeting, keep quiet. At night, I met the governor in Jaipur and told him what was my view and the background and why I had a certain view. Next day at 6 p.m. in Jodhpur House, that's where the governor and the chief minister stay. The party came in, Australian party. He gave them a cup of tea, hardly any words were exchanged. After 15 minutes, they left. Chapter closed. Now, probably, and my advisor's advice to me was, don't enter into any conversation which may appear to be a contradiction with what the governor may be wanting to say. Some very sound advice. That was it. I don't know, providence, whatever. They had come with an ulterior motive. I know that. But as I said, just my luck, you can say, but I don't think it was luck. Upar wala.
So we'll take some questions from the floor.
Please tell me a little about yourself.
Good evening, sir. I'm Santoshi. I come from Chennai. So before joining here as academic associate, I was working as faculty, member of faculty in Shankar IAS Academy. I was teaching there.
Shankar IAS Academy?
Yes.
Training institution?
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, sir. I've never gone to any such institution in my life.
Okay.
A, because my parents could not afford it.
Okay. So you described yourself as impatient, sir.
I know it's my weakness. I know it.
Yes, sir. And you joined the service very young. So you would have had subordinates who would have been older than you.
Yes,
much older than you. So they may not have obeyed you at once. And how did you deal with that? How did you make them take your orders? And my second question is that, sir, your colleagues who were in the same rank as you or your superiors, they would have been much knowledgeable than you when you joined the service. So how did you deal with that? You would have also had days when you felt that you know lesser than them. So how did you deal with your superiors or your peers who were on the same, like rank wise, they would have been the same as yours, but they would have had more knowledge because they would have been older than you, having more experience than you.
First question,
Yes.
Let me say that, that's why I said Rajasthan, I concluded by saying it's a wonderful state to have worked. Subordinates were never insubordinate. They were very respectful. So while, for example, my first posting in the state secretariat as a deputy secretary, there's a paragraph where I have mentioned right from the lower division clerk to the section officer. And I have acknowledged that they were a great source of help to me in understanding the nuances, the laws. See, we may not know all the things. Therefore, we must keep ourselves open to hearing from them, interacting with them. And that's why 50 years down the line, I still remember each one by name. They must have had some impact on me. They were not disrespectful in Rajasthan as a state, by and large. Superiors, yes, they do have more knowledge than you, but sometimes they don't also. But you can't say that you don't have as much knowledge that I have to your superior. You have to be more polite. But where they have more, for example, take Montague's case. He was my finance secretary. He was 1 year my junior in college. But he had a lateral entry. He had become finance secretary. So I had to respect him in every way. I never called him Montague while we were in office. Never. Always said, sir. So I can't, digress or go beyond a certain line. At the same time, he gave me all the respect. When I joined, I still remember, I went to him and said, I have arrived. He took me himself. Now, that is his greatness. To the room of all the three other secretaries in the Ministry of Finance, introduced me to them, and then came and showed me my room. Now, that is the boss. My younger from me by 1 year, junior in college, but my superior. And definitely in terms of knowledge of the finance world and the economic world, I was not an economist. I am a math student, simple science type superior, but always welcome, always able. And I know teen industrialists who would come to Montague, because I was dealing with what we call external division, external EC, inflows and outflows, both. At that time, we were very short of foreign exchange. Our BOP was something like, I don't know, a couple of $1 million. So we had the external commercial borrowings going out, aid from World Bank, borrowing from IMF, bilateral assistance, all that. So Montague told me once, in fact, an industrialist wanted to see me, I was out. I have not named him in the book, but I have said one of the czars of the industry. When I was away for a meeting, this was within 3 weeks when I came. My principal private secretary came to me and said, sir, so-and-so is called up from Mumbai, office of the gentleman. He had not called his office. He wants to come and meet you. I was taken aback. I said, I have no matter I've seen in my last 2-3 weeks relating to this huge conglomerate. So in the evening, Montague's room and my room were next door. So I was going to him. He was not coming to me. I was going to him invariably 2-3 times a day. So in the evening, I went to him. I said, sir, I have received this message. What do I do? There's no matter pending. So he said, Inderjit, look, you have now come into economic affairs. People will come to you. He's asking to come to your office. He has every right. Meet him. And then do what you think best. The gentleman did come and he told me, he said, I have no file to discuss. But you may be carrying, since you are new, certain wrong perceptions of my group. And I want to take this opportunity. He had brought his wonderful laptop or whatever it was at that time. And he took about 40 minutes to explain his big industrial empire and how it was functioning. And he went away. He said, I've come to discuss no file. Now, Montague's advice was very sound. He told me, no, that's how a boss should be.
Thank you, sir.
Do read his book, some of you, backstage. Those particularly, you see, it's taken the economic history of this country in the last 40 years. He's been involved since 1979 till 2014.
Professor Rao, would you like to ask a question?
It's nice of you to have got me to sit here. Mr. Khanna, we all call him Inder. I think I can continue to do that.
Well, my friend calls me Titch. So it doesn't matter. He has now sent the cat among the pigeons.
Our association is now 47 years. I think it's
75.
started 1975 when Ravi, Mathai, Uday Parikh and I constituted an education group, and he was director of primary and secondary education there. And our job was to help the government of Rajasthan implement a high power committee recommendations. The issues are no different than what it is today. Magnitude was different. How to get the girl child to be educated, how to ensure school enrollments go up, and how to get more children to schools and things of that kind. And we discovered one of the things when we went around the state asking his deputies, joint director, education, deputy directors, all of them, DEOs, they all said 80% of our time goes in teacher transfers and location of schools. And these are all driven by so many. This is one of the things. So as a result, educational supervisors are not able to guide the teachers. So we thought we should be able to release the time. My colleague here, T.P. Ramarao, and I got together, and I'm just mentioning one incident which he briefly mentioned in the book. And in that immediately said, okay, study if technology can help. So we came up with a computer model of teacher transfers and location of schools. Then I think you got the education minister to visit IIM Ahmedabad. Of course, the education minister said that if I have to follow this technology, then I lose all my power. Then we said it's the other way. I mean, if you are able to transfer 80 people today, according to your whims and fancies, this computer model will help you to transfer a lot more. because it will help you how to professionally, systematically do it. It took quite some time. I'm mentioning this because of the innovativeness and perseverance. Of course, Inder mentioned in this book how the location of schools later got implemented. He pursued a number of things and so on. For me, I think the most important thing when he mentioned to me that he's writing this, I was very excited that he's writing such a book. I was wishing before that. I wrote a book called Effective People. In this book on effective people, my chapter on civil servants starts with him. I just picked up about half a dozen people whom I know, civil servants who made a difference in the lives of others. And I classified him as an effective civil servant and as a role model. And now with this book, I want to classify him as a super effective person. Because the reason why I said effective people only do good to others and make a difference. Super effective people make whatever they are doing to others available for generations to come through their writings or institutions. So a book like this comes, I think it's filled with, I think, a very interesting kind of incidents. And the way we looked at when we got this manuscript was it describes in detail what you are likely to encounter in at least a dozen different roles that you perform as an IAS officer, starting with district magistrate to tribal commissioner to director of primary secondary education, UGC secretary, joint secretary, secretary planning, chief secretary, and so many. So we said it's a good way if you simply can look at each of the chapters where Inder has described the kind of encounters he had. We can put them into activities and then look at the competencies. What are the competencies? In fact, I was suggesting there is a commission called Capability Commission appointed by the Prime Minister of India to look at the capabilities of civil services across. So I was suggesting to them, the first thing they need to do is to look at the activities and then come up with a competency kind of things and so on. So this, in fact, my suggestion was that to look at this. This does about 60 to 70% of the work. Things have changed. It may not be the same. There may be new activities added, but the base is given there. So it's a good book. That is why I said it's a good book for those who are aspiring to get into civil service to know what it is. And of course, I don't need to mention the most important thing that struck all of us was Mr. Khanna as a person, as a human being, and his values. I think he is right now on the mission of passing on the values to Sonali and his grandchildren, Joshua, Annette. I think they're all sitting there, taking them around, explaining how life is. And that is the role of every parent, every teacher, everyone. And that gets reflected not only as a parent or teacher, as a boss, as a person who does work. In fact, I think when I wrote about my own little thing about my experience in IIM, I said organizations offer you platforms for experimenting, learning, and doing things. And if you want to get from the organization, you have to learn to give. It's only when you give, you can get. I think this book is a great demonstration of how, without complaining, I think Inder never complained anywhere. I think whatever job came to him, and then that is where he acknowledges the tolerance of his wife, the way she has adjusted, including here coming from with a civil service setup where you have a big house, so many servants to look after, to live in a 2-bedroom flat, walk all here. Two
bedroom, one bathroom.
2-room flat, and stand in the queue for getting water.
Water, yes.
Yeah.
Milk,
and at the
water,
same time, appreciate the Ahmedabad Electric Company's promptness in terms of the systems, how systems work. Even today, I think Ahmedabad is known for some of the systems, how well they work, how reliable they are, and things of that kind. I think there are so many of these values that are discussed here. Something which Inder has not mentioned, but I must mention is his chapter on his school days and college days. I think Mr. Bachchan was his schoolmate, and he has written forward in this. And he talks quite
when you said Inder, I said the teach part will come out when they see this book.
Yeah. I think one of the things which I didn't know, that when Mr. Amitabh Bachchan became a member of parliament, I think he was...
We exchanged notes. But he saw me one day when he was walking on in the officers' gallery. We sit on the side suddenly he waved out. Not done normally with the speaker, no. So naturally, I could just nod my head. So he sent me a note, which I've kept. I somehow enjoy keeping these type of things. That's why this postcard of 1962, then something of 1950. I never kept them with the intention of writing any book. It's a habit. All right. I forgot to mention, I write a diary. Even now I'm telling my grandchildren, I sat when they went away sightseeing, I was writing the diary of the last 4 pages for 4 days. I had not had time. So this is an unusual period. Otherwise, every night I will sit down and write, scribble whatever I want. But one thing I wanted to add to what TV said. The ministers are very clever people, politicians. And I'll take that out of his own example where he talked of the computer model for transfer of teachers. That is what Professor T.V. Rao and I didn't know head or tail about computers. But I knew about how transfers did take place. And the beauty of IIM was that the computer people were willing to collaborate, Professor T.V. Rao in that case, and help to prepare this computer model, in which I learned something. Now, that was even before I came here. While here, then Professor Bhatnagar and one more, I forget the
Jaju,
name.
maybe?
Jaju.
Oh, yeah.
So we prepared the next stage, which was the location of school, highly politicized. You see, if there's a primary school, there's a desire to have an upper primary, upper primary to second, and so on. Now, the point is, do you want everything in the same place? This village has a primary, no primary school for 10 kilometers, but you want to have another primary school in the same village. No. So with their help here in IIM, we developed a computer model for location of schools. I told my minister about it. He had to get hundreds of requests every year before the budget. Isko upgrade karo, isko kholo, ye karo. And I, as a good civil servant, would tell him, sir, ye to meri list hai, based on criteria, it seems reasonable. So he took credit of the computer model, not mentioning computer model. He says, ye 200 school kholne hain, 100 to maine director sahab ki list se le liye. He had not. It just accidentally happened that coincided with what the MLA was recommending to him. But he took credit. So for whatever the department did, he took the credit. So he could say these are not all politically motivated. And the rest 100. So they are clever people. They know which side the bread is buttered.
Yeah, it's a great book to read. I'm sure, I hope some of you will get this and enjoy reading this. Inder, thank you for giving such
thank
a
you.
wonderful
I think
book.
I'm just going to conclude by, once again highlighting what myself as still a fairly young professional, I would say. So one of the things was definitely family and values and what you pass on to the next generation, which is highlighted throughout the book, and how much he appreciates everything that his parents, wife, children have contributed. At the very beginning, what really caught my attention was the habit of writing, which he just mentioned towards the end. Like all of us, I think we have forgotten that, the habit of writing. So just sitting down and writing for 10-15 minutes every day also becomes such a challenge. And I believe that we all need to find ways to overcome that. Without that, I don't think, no matter what profession you belong to, I think to succeed and to have that clarity of thought, we really need to inculcate the habit of writing. And the third thing that I really appreciated was how, again, throughout the book, he highlights the importance of work-life balance, like any and every occasion, how they found time. So if they were in some district where there was nothing but just a dam, fine, go for a walk at the dam. If there was nothing else but a little club, then fine, just go and find time with your family, spend it there. So some things which I think, particularly my generation for sure, is also starting to forget or not giving ample importance to: writing, work-life balance. I think these were the things which I took away from the book. So thank you so much for your time and for this extremely insightful talk today. So I'll request. Yes. Okay. So he's a recently appointed head librarian.
Sir came to the library also. Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to propose a vote of thanks for today's book talk. I express my gratitude and sincere thanks to Sri Inderjit Khanna ji for agreeing to deliver a book talk on his recently published book, of course, Classes Before My Eyes. an excellent narration of his memorable event during his time with the government and with public as well. My sincere thanks to Professor Errol D'Souza for connecting the dots from the beginning, and special thanks to, of course, you, sir, for coming all the way to attend this book talk. But the event would not have been successful without the participants. Of course, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to all the participants, those who are here and those who attended online as well. Thanks are due to JSW Center for Public Policy for co-hosting the event with the library. Thanks to Professor Namrata for hosting the event. I would like to extend my thanks to Gopal Iyer and Monaj from JSW Center for Public Policy, Rina, Viral and Vavesh from library, and Nikul from Computer Center, and Hemant for his logistical support for AB. Thank you. Thank you all.
Oops. Acha. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, sir. You can join, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I think.